Log of CPT, Captain Sternwind, 3rd month, dusklight tide aboard the Humble Prince. Entry 147th, the hammer and the helm. The sea was behaving again, though I no longer trust her smile. She'd lulled us with calm skies these past 3 days, long enough for the crew to get lazy and the passengers to forget their land legs. We had just left the shallows near Isle Whitecrag and were halfway through the Norn Current, bound south for the floating docks of Pelberth. The sun was low, red, and bleeding across the water, the way it does before something awful. That's when we spotted the sails. Black-painted masts sloped in like talons. 3 of them, no flags, no name. Just the silence of certain death. Pirates. Fast ones, likely Eastmarrow scum, though they bore no crest, didn't need to. Their ships were lean and low, like panthers at sea. They wanted us crippled, not sunk. Boarding parties, ransoms, stolen folk. No honor in it, just trade. We ran full canvas. The Humble Prince is no warship, but she's swift when trimmed and angry. Still, we were outpaced. The crew held tight. I gave the order to prepare the boiling pitch and pray, in equal measure. Then the wind shifted, no breeze, no warning. Just thunder. A second sun lit the sea in molten gold. And from the horizon, as if carved from the deep itself, they came. The stone carriers. At first, I thought we were seeing a mirage, or the back of some forgotten continent. Towering ships, blocky and grey, like castles dragged to sea. But they moved, gods, how they moved, low in the water from sheer weight, but propelled by some rune or engine I'll never understand. You feel them before you hear them. A deep hum, a grumble that shakes your teeth. The pirates broke formation at the first volley. Granite spears, no, actual blocks of stone, launched by crank-driven arms, arced across the water, hitting with the force of a falling god. One pirate ship split in 2, like softwood. Another veered and struck reef. The third tried to run, but the dwarves sent flying chains through the air, dragging it back like a misbehaving hound. It was over in minutes. Aboard the lead dwarven vessel stood a single figure, helm of black iron, beard bound in rings, cloak woven with basalt thread. No name was given, nor needed. They sent a rowboat to check on us, stern-faced, professional. Not a word wasted. Just a simple question. Any debts owed? I said yes. My life. My crew. My ship. They nodded. Then you'll speak of it. So, here I am, writing it down. Not to repay the debt, but to honor it. Let it be known, should you sail the Norn Current in spring, do so with coin and caution. But know that, if ever the stone carriers are near, the sea answers to stone, and pirates will learn to drown in it. CPT, Captain. Log of CPT. Captain 10th month, mid-tide, Port Halomere aboard the Humble Prince. Dry dock. Entry 162nd. Rope, wood, steel, salt if a ship is alive. And I believe she is, then dry dock is the closest she comes to surgery. The Humble Prince has served me through 14 seasons, 3 mutinies, only 2 successful, and enough storms to make a priest curse. She's earned her rest in Halomere's stone slip, hauled from the tide and left to bake under the honest sun. From the quay she looks naked without her rigging, mast and sails, like a plucked bird. That's the point. Every fitting, every rope, every timber gets its moment under the eye, stripped bare for judgment. A captain may love his ship, but he must still be willing to gut her, if he means for her to live. Day 1 to 3, rigging. The nerves and veins of a ship. The first job was to strip her bare of her old standing rigging. 24 riggers arrived with the dawn, wiry men and women with calloused hands and voices hoarse from shouting over wind. They moved up and down the shrouds like monkeys, knives in their teeth, cutting down the lines in great black coils. The air filled with the smell of old tar and salt, thick, heavy, clinging. They flaked each rope onto the dockside, where I walked the length of it, pinching, between my fingers, listening for the dry snap of parted hemp fibers. Salt eats rope from the inside, A line may look sound and still be one good squall away from parting. Anything suspect went in the discard pile, to be cut down later for dockside use. We ordered new standing rigging from the ropewalk, hemp cores with coir sheathing, treated in hot tar. Thick as a man's wrist, each line had to be whipped at both ends with waxed marline before being spliced to brass thimbles. Iron rusts too quick in Hallowmere's damp salt air, brass holds, though it costs double. Once the shrouds were set, the stays went up, forestay, backstay, and the 2 running backstays for heavy weather. Each was tensioned with polished turnbuckles until they thrummed like bowstrings. You could feel it through the deck, the Prince pulling herself taut, her spine drawing straight again. Running rigging came next. Halyards, sheets, braces, topping lifts, downhauls. We measured each twice, coiled them neatly on the dock, and hoisted them aloft. Pine tar dripped onto the deck like molasses in the heat, leaving sticky black smudges on anyone unlucky enough to pass beneath. By the end of the 3rd day, the Prince had her veins again though. She would not breathe until her new lungs, her sails, were bent on. Day 4 to 7, mast. The spine, the old mainmast, had been sprung last winter. A subtle bend after a gale, but enough to throw her balance in a hard tack. Lowering it was a half-day operation, block and tackle from the key crane, crew, at the taglines, dockhands shouting to keep her from swinging into the stone slip. When she finally lay on the dock, I ran my hand along her length. She had served well, fur from the southern slopes, seasoned in salt air. But the bend was plain, and a bent spine will only grow worse. The new mast arrived from the northern furlands on a barge, a single spar cut from a tree older than the Empire. Straight as truth, 38 feet from heel to truck, tapering clean. Before stepping her, the shipwrights coated her in boiled linseed oil. Each coat rubbed in by hand until the wood shone warm and golden. Raising her was a slow, reverent business. The sheer legs took her weight, the crew manned the guides, and inch by inch, she rose into the sky until her heel settled into the step. There was a moment's hush when she came to rest, a collective breath as if the Prince herself had stood tall again after a long convalescence. Day 8 to 12. Canvas. The breath. Mistress Vale, sailmaker of Hallowmere, delivered the new sails herself, trailed by 4 apprentices, carrying great canvas bundles on their shoulders. She's a woman with a voice like a foghorn and a habit of spitting in the palm before she shakes your hand. For luck, she says. The sails were cut from heavy flax canvas, each panel double-stitched with waxed linen thread. Before delivery, Vale had treated them with boiled oil, white lead, and cedar extract to ward off mildew. They smelled faintly sweet beneath the tang of oil, like old cedar chests in a grandmother's attic. We bent the main first, lacing its head to the gaff, and roping the foot to the boom. Vale's apprentices worked the cringles at clews and earrings with a speed that shamed my crew. The jibs came next, then the topsails, each one tested with a hoist and drop. I made the crew raise and lower them 3 times each, practice for the green hands, and to work out any new stiffness before we met the wind. By the 12th day, the Prince looked like herself again, her lungs ready to drink the wind. Day 13 to 15, hull and barnacles. The skin from the quay, her underbelly, looked like a reef, barnacles thick as shingles, streaked with weed and worm tubes. The smell was a living thing, salt, rot, and the sour tang of marine growth left too long. Scraping began at dawn. Each man took a scraper or chisel and worked from the keel up, metal ringing against seasoned planks. Barnacles fell in sheets, clattering onto the dock and crunching underfoot. Once clean, we sanded her hull smooth, paying the seams with oakum hammered in with caulking mallets. The final touch was 2 coats of copper-based anti-fouling paint, thick, toxic, and the color of old blood. She would cut through the water clean now, without the drag of her old sea crust. Day 16 to 18, board replacement. The bones 3 planks on her starboard quarter were soft. Salt water had crept under the pitch where a lazy caulker left his work shallow last year. We pried them loose with crowbars, revealing the frame beneath, still sound. The replacements were seasoned oak, plain to fit and pegged home, sealed with pine tar and tallow. When struck with the mallet, they rang true, a deep, solid thump that told you she was ready to take a beating. Day 19 to 24. Crew, blood and breath. A ship without crew is a corpse. Halomir's Tavern served as my hiring hall, and the smell of stale ale, pipe smoke, and saltwater sweat was my backdrop for the week. I took 6 new hands. Jareth, riverboat pilot with a scar across his chin, eyes always half narrowed against glare. Callan, who claimed to have harpooned a kraken. Half the story was lies, but half might have been truth. Sarah Finn, quick with a knot, and quicker with a blade, her left ear notched like a cat's. Boric and Tan, whaling brothers who worked without words between them. Mist, a boy with pale eyes and the kind of stillness that unsettles most men. They joined my old hands, swelling the Prince's crew to 18, enough for sail, watch and fight. Day 25 to 30, training, Yyth for the Prince. The sea does not ask if you are a fighting ship, she decides for you. We drilled every afternoon. Cutlass practice on the forecastle, pike drills at the waist, and swivel gun training at the stern. I made them run fire on deck drills, until they could douse a blaze blindfolded. Callan ran harpoon throws over the side, claiming it steadied the arm for boarding fights. Even Mist learned to reload a swivel without spilling powder. We practiced rappelling boarders with buckets of sand scattered over the deck, slippery footing that forced footwork sharp as a dancer's. By week's end, they moved like one creature, all teeth and sinew. Day 31, musing on shore, invest or retire. When the humble Prince stood gleaming in the sun, new mast proud, sails, crisp, hull clean and coppered, I felt the weight of years on me. 14 seasons, at sea. The storms sit heavier in my bones. The rum tastes sweeter ashore. The dockmaster says the stone carriers are looking for fast runners. Good coin, steady work. There's land inland, where the wind smells of wheat, not salt. I could sell her now, live in comfort, and never again wake to the shriek of a storm in the shrouds. But I know myself. I'd still wake at dawn thinking of the tide. The sea is a mistress who does not forgive those who leave her. For now, the choice waits. The tide turns soon, and the humble Prince is ready to breathe again. And so, perhaps, am I. CPT. Captain, log, of CPT, Captain 7th month, 1st dawn, Moonglass Sea aboard the humble Prince. Entry 177th. Beneath the foam. There are days when the sea smiles, and you'd be wise not to smile back. She's an old trickster, all glitter and glass one moment, teeth and salt the next. Today she wore the face of a mirror, clear skies, not a breath of wind, our sails hanging slack like laundry in the sun. That's when I saw the first ripple. Not the kind that wind makes. This was deliberate. A head broke the surface 30 paces off our starboard beam. Long hair, wet and dark as kelp, clung to a face too perfect to be human. The eyes were the giveaway, green, slitted, unblinking. She watched us without expression. Then, without so much as a splash, she was gone. I knew what it meant. The denizens were here. We'd heard them before. The faint chime of shell trinkets, the hiss of breath just under the hull, the thump of a tail against the waterline. Sometimes they come for trade. Sometimes for vengeance. And sometimes they just watch. The call came just before noon. A voice, clear as any sailor's but rolling with the tide, rose from beneath the port rail. Captain, who knows the current, will you speak? It was in the shared tongue, though each word rolled like it had been carried through a wave. I leaned over the rail to see 3 of them, half in sunlight, half in shadow. One was the speaker, a merman with a chest patterned in pale blue swirls. Another was older, skin dark as driftwood, wearing a collar strung with pearls the size of fists. The third, hard to tell if male or female, kept their face hidden in the shade of the waves. They offered trade. Pearls, seaweed with the sheen of bronze, and a sack of black silt so heavy it nearly pulled my arms out when I hauled it up. Ocean's soil, dredged from the deepest shelves. fertilizes anything it touches, they claimed. I gave them fresh fruit from our hold, copper nails, and 2 bottles of spiced rum. We spoke only a little. Never about their young, you never ask. Never about where they dwell. But I noticed they always looked past us, scanning the horizon, listening to the deep. When I asked why, the older one flicked his tail and said, "The sea is ours, but not only ours. The dark moves below, we must watch." Then they were gone, sliding under without so much as a ripple, leaving only the pearls in my palm and the faint scent of brine and kelp. The crew whispered for hours afterward, saying we'd been marked, watched, maybe protected. I don't know. I only know that night, as the moon rose, I heard singing from far below the hull. Sad, sweet, and heavy with something I couldn't name. If you travel the Moonglass Sea often, mind your manners. The denizens will remember you. Whether for kindness or for trespass is up to you. CPT. Captain. Log of CPT. Captain, 11th month, 1st watch, Port Halomere, aboard the Humble Prince. Entry 183rd. Bread, silt, blood and bolts day 1 to 2, the first runs for supplies. If a ship eats as much as her crew, then the Humble Prince has the appetite of a starving giant. You don't provision for a week. You provision for a voyage, and that means food enough to feed 18 mouths for 2 months, with enough extra to trade when coin runs thin. The market wharf in Halomere is a tangle of canvas awnings and shouted bargains. You can smell it from half a league away. Fish guts, fresh bread, sweat, and spices blown in from the eastern caravans. We started with the staples. Salt beef and pork, brined in great barrels. I tapped each with a mallet, and listened for the hollow ring that tells you there's air inside. Air means rot. Hardtack, baked in brick ovens until it could chip a tooth. Kept dry, it lasts longer than some marriages. Ship's biscuit, softer than hardtack but gone in a week. I bought it to keep the crew happy at the start of the run. Dried peas and beans, stored in sacks to fill the bellies when meat runs short. Casks of fresh water, sealed with wax and oak hoops. A ship runs on wind, but a crew runs on water. Then came the comforts. Spiced rum from the Southern Isles. I bought 3 casks, knowing full well they'd be half gone before the first port. Dried citrus, to keep the scurvy at bay, and the spirits high. Sugared almonds, because a happy crew rows faster when the wind dies. Finally, the trade goods, bolts of dyed cloth, smoked fish, carved, bone combs, and little brass wind chimes from the Smith's Quarter. These aren't for us, they're for whatever market we stumble into next. Day 3. The sale of the deep silt. The denizen's gift, the black ocean silt, dredged from the abyss, had been stored in a double-lined sack in the aft hold. The smell is peculiar, not foul, but heavy, mineral, like rain on stone after a long drought. In Halomere, there's a guild of terramancers, earth mages who work soil like a carpenter works wood. They know the worth of that silt. To them, it's liquid gold for the ground, makes crops grow twice as fast. Flowers bloom out of season, and fruit sweet enough to shame the sun. I met with Guildmaster Ulgrin in his stone-walled counting room. He was all rings and soft hands, but his eyes went sharp when I laid the sack on his table. "You've brought me a treasure dredged from the deep." "How far down?" "Far enough the sun's never seen it," I told him. "Gift from the denizens themselves." He opened the sack, sifted a pinch through his fingers, and smiled like a man in love. He paid in silver ingots, neat as loaves of bread, enough to buy provisions twice, over and still have coin left for repairs, wages, and a captain's indulgence. Day 4. The injury. It happened during the loading of the last cask of water. The dock crane slipped, whether from frayed rope or careless hand, I still don't know, and the cask swung wild, smashing into the rail. Sarah Finn was in its path. She took the blow on the shoulder, hard enough to knock her off her feet. Her arm hung loose, and I feared the bone was broken. Before I could shout for the dockside medic, Mist, quiet Mist, who rarely speaks above a murmur, was at her side. From his sea chest, he pulled a leather roll of instruments, bone saw, forceps, needles, gut thread, and little vials of clear and amber liquid. He moved with a confidence I've only seen in surgeons. Not broken, he said, after probing the shoulder. Dislocated. Hold her. 2 men pinned her while he gave her a mouthful of rum. With a sharp, clean motion, he rolled her arm and popped the joint back into place. Sarah let out a noise like tearing canvas, then went limp. Mist bound the arm in a sling, gave her a dose of willow bark tincture, and ordered her to rest. When I asked him where he learned his craft, he just shrugged. Before the sea, I didn't press him. Every sailor has a life they've left behind. Some just carry theirs in a leather roll under the bunk. Day 5 to 7, the suspicions about the second mate Rune is a capable man, though too quiet for my liking. He does his work well, keeps the watches tight, and rarely drinks. But I've noticed him taking extra time in the aft hold, the one I keep locked except when needed. 2 days ago, while taking the night round, I saw him coming up from there with a small wrapped bundle. He started when he saw me, muttered something about checking the lashings, and walked off quick. That same night, I found a scrap of oilcloth wedged behind a crate, too stiff and shaped too neatly for food or clothing. It smelled faintly of oiled steel. Halomir is strict on arms trade. Crossbows in particular are heavily taxed and sometimes banned outright. They're easy to hide, easy to fire, and dangerous in too many hands. If Rune is smuggling them aboard, he's risking the prince, the crew, and my neck. I haven't confronted him yet. Better to watch, to see where the trail leads. If I'm wrong, I'll lose a good officer. If I'm right, I'll have to choose whether to turn him over to the port guard, or see if the profit's worth the risk. Day 8 to 10. Final preparations. With the provisions stowed, the trade goods secured, and the silver from the silt. Sail. Hidden in the false panel behind my cabin's chart desk, we made ready to sail. The crew's in good spirits. Sarah's arm is healing thanks to Mist though. She swears she'll be back at her station before the week's out. Rune keeps to himself, but I've caught him watching the tide tables more than usual. There's something in his eyes, calculation, not curiosity. I'll keep my own counsel until I know the truth. The humble prince rides high and eager at her mooring, fresh paint on her hull, her new sails furled tight. The wind smells of open water, and my hands itch for the wheel. Still, there's a shadow to this departure, not from the weather, but from the thought that somewhere in my hold, wrapped in oilcloth, might be the means for a dozen quiet killings, and that one of my own officers might be the one to deliver them. The sea doesn't forgive the careless, or the blind. I'll keep my eyes open. CPT. Captain. Log of CPT. Captain. Entry 197th latitude. Questionable. Longitude. Who's to say? The humble prince has endured many moods of the sea, but last night she was a plaything to a tantrum. The storms came up from the southern teeth, clouds black and cracked with lightning, the wind bending our masts like willow whips. No compass needle nor seasoned eye could steer a true line. We were at the mercy of the sea's caprice. By dawn, we'd been spat out far from our intended ports, off the coast of Red Shale, with its dark cliffs jutting. Like a row of rusted blades, the infamous castle of 6 cities perched above them like some old smug vulture. I confess, it was a welcome sight. Not for beauty, it's a squat fortress, brick red from the shale it's cut from, but for the simple fact that its flag flies no dragon, no crown, and no banner of the Crimson Pentacle. The 6 cities govern themselves through a fractious council of elected trade delegates. Some call it a democracy, others a merchant's anarchy. Either way, no single tyrant holds the reins, and that makes for a certain freedom in their harbors, freedom for honest traders and smugglers alike. We anchored in the lee of the Red Shale cliffs, sending up our signal. Soon enough, a flotilla of small craft came darting out, bright painted dinghies crewed by the Shipwrights Guild. Their foreman, a broad man with a beard bleached white from sun and salt, hailed me with a voice like a tavern door slam. Turns out, they had a peculiar offer. The guild needed a capable vessel to tow a chain of their dinghies to harbour town in Yyth. 42 of them, he said, each loaded with fine carpentry and half-built hulls. The seas have been too rough for their smaller vessels, but your horizon. Yyth's wake could pull 'em through in 2 days' sail with the wind right. I considered. Towing 42 dinghies is no small task. It's like dragging a drunken wedding party through a crowded ballroom, but the guild pays in hard coin and favors. And in Yyth, a favor from the Shipwrights Guild can be worth more than silver. While the foreman spoke, my eye wandered to the crew. The storm had done its share of damage to their spirits. Bosun Rolling was already barking at deckhands to re-rig the starboard lines. My second mate, Rune, whom I have not yet cleared in my suspicions regarding those illegal crossbows, was quietly conferring with a pair of guildmen. Too quietly for my liking. If I'm to accept this towing job, I'll need to keep a tighter leash on Rune. The guild's shipments are valuable, but a clever hand could hide contraband under tarps or inside hollowed timbers. And in a place like the Six Cities, where inspection is more about bribes than law, the temptation would be considerable. Still, work is work, and coin is coin. I told the foreman we'd tow his dinghies, provided the guild saw to our water casks, food stores, and a few barrels of their salted pork. He grinned like I'd just offered him my cabin. Done, he said. The day closed with our anchor still down, the crew busy mending sails and clearing storm debris. Tomorrow, we'll take the line of dinghies in tow and head south. But tonight, I'll sleep with one ear open and a hand on my blunderbuss. Not for pirates, nor for storms, but for whatever game my second mate thinks he's playing. Captain's log. Entry, 203 weathered 3 days of contrary seas. 6 of the dinghies are gone to the storm. 2 splintered outright, the others cut adrift when lines fouled or strained beyond saving. Their loss bites deep, for they were the lighter hands of our landfall work, but the crew remains, and that is the better blessing. The storm broke not into fair wind, but into a stubborn stillness. 3 days of glassy waters and a sun that mocked our every canvas. Sails hung limp and motionless. The sea itself was a mirror, its depths holding the sky so true that the horizon seemed a seam in the world. We drifted under tow from our remaining longboats, though the progress was a crawl. Oars creaking, men blistered and cursing in good rhythm. It was then that the denizens found us. Not islanders, as I had half expected, but the merfolk, sea-born, sleek, of form and silver-scaled, their eyes reflecting the light like coinage. Under moon. They rose in groups of 2s and 4s from the deeper blue, their motions smooth as swallows. No songs this time, only curious circling and long looks at our ship's crest. I have come to understand something of their ways. They travel with the tides and currents, in ways our charts cannot capture, and they bear messages far and fast beneath the surface. Word of us, I suspect, had gone ahead. Why else would they greet us with such open hands and no weapons in sight? One among them, a tall-necked fellow with pale markings like frost, spoke in the broken tongue I have heard before among their kind. The words were few, but the warning was plain: trouble in the port of Greenwall, worse still in Harbour Town. They did not linger, but their passing left the water alive with small ripples, as if the sea itself were whispering. I hold it certain now that these merfolk can pass word across leagues faster than any pigeon or runner ashore, and that our name rides kindly upon their speech, for the time being. We pressed on, the tow aided once by a faint wind that teased but did not stay. When Harbour Town's breakwater finally crept into view, I was unprepared for the sight that greeted us. Harbour Town, once a bright water haven, lay open and wounded. The outer piers, where fisher boats and traders alike had once jostled for berth, were split and half sunk, their pilings jutting like broken teeth from the tide. The old harbour chain hung slack in the water, rust already blooming along its iron belly, as though it had not been raised since the calamity. The waterfront I remembered as a riot of colour. Awnings in salt-faded reds and yellows, barrels stacked high, with the day's catch, gulls squabbling over spilled fish, was now hushed but for the groan of warped wood. Nets trailed unattended from collapsed shacks, drifting in the water like drowned cobwebs. The salt air was heavy, with an undertone of soot. It was not the work of warships or bombardment, but of a single hand, so I was told by the first soul brave enough to speak with me. One person, they said, had come upon them like a gale in human form. No one could name them for certain, though descriptions varied between a tall man in a dark greatcoat and a cloaked figure whose face was never seen. The devastation was precise in its cruelties. The church of Boulder, its high white spire once the first thing a sailor saw upon rounding the headland, was gutted. Its timbers charred, bell fallen and cracked, the altar stones blackened as though struck by storm and fire alike. Not even the weather vane survived. It lay bent in the square, a twisted arrow that now pointed to nothing. Worse still was the Red Cap Inn, where the killer had left their bloodiest work. The inn's heavy oak doors were found barred from within after the slaughter. When they were forced, the air inside was a rank mix of spilled ale and death. Nearly all within, patrons, barkeep, travelers, were slain. The walls were marked in ways the locals dared not describe aloud, and the hearth had been filled, not with logs, but with the splintered remains of chairs, as though in mockery of warmth. Of the killer's departure, no one could speak. Some said they vanished into the forested hills behind the town, others swore. They walked calmly down the pier and stepped into the sea, never to surface. The merfolk gave no sign they knew more, though I suspect they do. As I walked the harbor's edge, the wind finally found us, low, sighing, as though the place itself had grown weary. I am left to wonder what enemy can come alone and leave such ruin, and whether they walk still in the world ahead of us. For now, I keep the crew aboard at night, and double the watches. Harbortown's wounds are deep, and its silence heavier than any storm.